Trump exposes the Cuban regime's farce by revealing a contradiction that the dictatorship has always tried to hide. While the Havana leadership blames the United States for all the island's problems, direct relatives connected to the very heart of Castroism live in Florida, travel, enjoy American freedoms, and escape the misery that the Cuban people face every day. This Monday, June 8, 2026, the case gains momentum after Washington's new offensive. Against Miguel Díaz-Canel, Liz Cuesta, Manuel Anido Cuesta, Alejandro Castro Espim, and names connected to the Castro family. Trump's pressure has targeted money, tourism, international cards, foreign companies, and now also the regime's moral standing. The mother-in-law of Alejandro Castro Espim, a powerful figure in Cuban intelligence and the son of Raúl Castro, lives in Hialeah at the heart of the Cuban exile community. In the United States, while the dictatorship keeps selling anti-American rhetoric to maintain power in Havana, what was the Cuban elite hiding? Why did she flee to the United States? How did Trump turn this hypocrisy against the regime? I'm about to explain everything. If you enjoy straightforward content, subscribe. We post daily. The offensive began in a sensitive area for the dictatorship. It starts now. The Trump administration imposed new sanctions against key figures of the Cuban regime and tightened the crackdown on structures linked to the island's military power. The list included Miguel Díaz-Canel, his wife Liz Cuesta, his stepson Manuel Anido Cuesta, Alejandro Castro Espin, and Raúl Alejandro Castro Calles, son of Alejandro. Entities linked to the Cuban political and military apparatus were also included. The measure was not just symbolic. It blocks assets under American jurisdiction, restricts financial operations, and instills fear in any company that still tries to do business with the Castro leadership. That's where the dictatorship's narrative starts to fall apart. The regime has always tried to sell the idea that the United States was the external enemy, the one to blame for poverty, blackouts, food shortages, and the collapse of the island. But the communist elite themselves don't live like the Cuban people. While the average worker faces lines, blackouts, and crushed wages, families connected to the regime's leaders turn up living in Miami, Madrid, and other centers of comfort. The rhetoric is against Washington, but the refuge is within the United States. The strongest case involves Ana Anadis Cardero Pacheco, mother of Ana Anali Lilian Rueda Cardero, wife of Alejandro Castro Espim. According to the investigation published by Marti News, she initially arrived in the United States with a tourist visa, then spent years traveling frequently and obtained permanent residency in 2023 through the Cuban Adjustment Act. Since then, according to the published information, she has continued traveling to Cuba. The other daughter, Maurice Rueda Cardero, sister-in-law of Alejandro Castro Espim, also lives in South Florida and is said to already have American citizenship. Both of them are connected to Hialeah, a city known for having one of the largest Cuban exile communities in the United States. The contradiction is significant because Alejandro Castro Espim is not just any figure. He is the son of Raúl Castro, has been involved in the Cuban security apparatus for years, and is seen as an influential figure within the power structure surrounding the dictatorship. While he writes, appears at events, and maintains a hardline stance against the United States, his political family enjoys exactly the system that the regime publicly attacks. This is the farce that Trump helps to bring down when he puts the Castro family and their operatives under real pressure. The investigation also pointed out the Rueda Cardero family's past within the regime. The father of Ana Anali and Maurice was Hugo Leandro Rueda Jomaron, a colonel connected to the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces and a figure associated with the military apparatus in the eastern part of the island. He was presented as someone trusted by the Castro regime, with a history within the structures that supported the regime for decades. The family, which is now connected to life in the United States, did not come from an abandoned outskirts of Cuba. This point dismantles the old excuse of the dictatorship. These are not ordinary Cubans fleeing misery in search of freedom. What is being discussed is the family of people connected to the top of the system, using the door to the United States. Meanwhile, the regime continues to repress opponents, silence journalists, control businesses, and use the state apparatus to enrich its own elite. The Cuban people don't have that choice. Those who criticize the dictatorship inside the island face pressure, surveillance, and fear. Those who belong to the circle of power are able to move around, travel, live abroad, and keep ties with Havana. The economic pressure has also already started to produce visible effects. Foreign companies connected to tourism and financial services pulled back after the executive order signed by Trump on May 1, 2026. Hotel chains like Blue Diamond and Iberostar have distanced themselves from structures connected to the Geisha military conglomerate. The Central Bank of Cuba also announced that Visa and MasterCard services would stop working on the island because of the risk of sanctions linked to FinCimex, which is connected to the military-controlled system. This move hits the regime where it hurts the most. Cuba depends on tourism, remittances, external financial operations, and foreign companies to sustain an economy that is already suffocated. When Trump targets Geisha, he's aiming at the mechanism that many analysts point to as one of the biggest boxes of economic control of the dictatorship. It's not an attack on the ordinary Cuban. It's an attack on the machine that manages hotels, money, companies, cards, and privileges while the population faces shortages. Havana's reaction was predictable. The Cuban government called the sanctions an act of aggression, talked about sovereignty, and tried to turn the sanctioned leadership into a victim. But the problem is that now reality is harder to hide. Diaz-Canel, Manuel repeats anti-American rhetoric. Liz Cuesta might say she feels honored to be on the list. And Bruno Rodriguez can accuse Washington of intervention, but the impression left is a different one. The regime's elite criticize the United States in public, but they run to the United States when they need security, comfort, and a future. Manuel Anido Cuesta also got involved in the center of the offensive. He is the son of Liz Cuesta and stepson of Miguel Diaz-Calderón. His inclusion on the sanctions list shows that Washington is not only looking at formal positions, but also at family networks, close operators, and people who can serve as an extension of the regime's assets or politics. This is an important change. The Cuban dictatorship has always survived by hiding power within relatives, intermediary companies, military structures, and economic allies. Now the American message is simple. The last name, the family connection, and the political benefit are also on the radar. Raúl Alejandro Castro Calles, son of Alejandro Castro Spin, was also included on the list. This fact increases the weight of the offensive because it shows that the pressure was not limited to the old generation of Castroism. It reaches heirs, young operators, and people who may maintain businesses or influence within the island. The dynasty that tried to turn Cuba into family property now faces pressure that spans generations. The problem is not just someone living in the United States. The problem is the Castro elite using American freedom while the regime condemns that same freedom for internal consumption. And now, while Havana tries to rail against the sanctions, the world sees the image the regime most wanted to hide. The communist elite talks about revolution for the people, but chooses American freedom for their own family. I'm Milson Alves, global, internationalist, and minister. My purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe, and check the comments at the end to engage more with the Milson Alves community.